everybody. Good morning. My name is Stephen Clark, and I'm here to give you guys a brief presentation on Greek Old Comedy to the transformation into Greek New Comedy. Now, theater is probably one of the most recognizable forms of performance that man has ever seen, and it's certainly one of the oldest. Theater actually gets its roots from the early 5th century BCE in ancient Greece. Back then, there were tragic works just as there is today, and there were also comedic works, but comedic works progressed over the time between the playwrights of Aristophanes and Menander. Now, works written by Aristophanes are typified as Greek Old Comedy, and then once we transition into Menander, the plays are now referred to as Greek New Comedy. Now, even though they serve the same purpose, they're comedies. They were meant to entertain and make people laugh, just like sitcoms today. They were different in how they were structured and the things that they sort of poked fun at. Now, at the time when Aristophanes did most of his writing, it was the 5th century BCE, and during this period, Athens was pretty much the undisputed mistress of Greece. It was like the power to be. And over the course of Aristophanes' career, it spread through the last quarter of the 5th century and into the first part of the 4th century. And during most of his life, Athens was engaged with a conflict with Sparta, which is known as the Peloponnesian War. Now, even though Aristophanes wrote over 40 plays in his lifetime, only 11 have survived to today, 11 complete works out of 40 that we know that he did write. Just to give you a brief overview of what Old Comedy is, Old Comedy grew out of phallic songs and processions with phallic symbols, and you could actually see part of this because a lot of the costumes that were used for Greek Old Comedy incorporated some sort of artificial penis of an unproportionate size. I mean, there's a little something going on there in ancient Greece. Broadly termed, any play in the mid to late 5th century BCE is referred to as an old comedy, but we tend to only typify it to the works of Aristophanes because he was the most profound playwright of the time. And old comedy is they focused mainly on political issues at the time. What they had to do is they had to ask a question and then turn it into some sort of event that people would be entertained by. Now, because of the conflict of the time, a lot of what was done was based around political issues and contemporary social issues. Perhaps one of the most well-known attributes of Greek Old Comedy is that it often parodied well-known people and incorporated farcical situations. Now, one of my sources, Walton, describes Aristophanes' plays as being a fierce political and social satire that lampooned institutions and individuals. And that's actually exactly what it did. So, during the time of Old Comedy, Greece faced numerous problems such as the Peloponnesian War, or wealth, poverty, and even the role of women in the state. And some believe that Old Comedy helped reinforce the bonds within the community by sharing in an occasion by laughing at all the different problems that everyone was facing. I mean, we see points like this today where, a group of friends has an issue and everyone starts making a joke out of it, so that way it's not so much of an issue anymore, or at least for a little while. Old comedies, especially Aristophanic plays, they incorporated a chorus as part of the presentation. But the chorus, although it could represent people, at certain times they also represented non-human objects such as animals or even clouds at certain points. And it's important for Old Comedy to contain some sort of supernatural event. One of Aristophanes' most well-known plays would be Lysistrata. For those of you who don't know, Lysistrata is a play in which, during the time of the war with Sparta, a group of women decided that in order to end the war and bring their husbands home, they were going to refuse sex. They were just going to give it up cold turkey, and then the frustration of the men were going to cause them to stop going to war, on both sides. So this was a group of conspiring Greek women and Spartan women, and they were just going to hold it all back, and then the men were going to be so frustrated that the war was going to be over. Now, this was sort of used to parody the role of women in society and sort of to extrapolate on the idea of bringing in an end to the war. The women saw themselves as an organized group, and they used sex as a weapon because that sort of just hopped on that sort of, even today, sort of stereotypical piece of wisdom where, you know, women can always use sex as a weapon. I mean, we even see that sort of issue today. In writing Lysistrata, he used that stereotype in order to justify the plot. Instead of just having the women just decide, oh, we're going to end the war and that's it, he used something that could be believable to his majority of a male audience that would make this idea of just the war ending like that much more feasible. Another play that Aristophanes did, which is a good example, is a play that he did called Birds. Now, Birds is an example of certain other elements of Greek comedy. And within the context of this play, we see the use of two concepts, which is the fulfillment of a grand ambition by a character, and we see the occurrence of supernatural events. And in this story, the main character, he sort of aspires for greatness, aspires for power, and then, as many Greek comedies ended, it ends with the interference of the gods in order to bring some sort of resolution to the plot. And then, at this point, towards the latter half of Aristophanes' life, we begin to see comedy sort of shift into change and how it's sort of going to transition into new comedy. And the problem is, over 40 writers were known in the period between Aristophanes and Menander, but none of the works survived. So we know their names, but they didn't survive. Menander's career began early in the 4th century, and at this point, Greece was influenced mainly by Alexander the Great because of his conquests, and I'm being signaled and not sure what it means. Wrap it up. Okay. Well, the point, new comedy was a little different. It didn't focus on political issues because of the political situation with the influence of outside power. And we sort of see that now plays start to focus what they do today, and it was focused on personal issues, struggles between like men and women, parents and children, and they used those situations in order to create comedy. And that's sort of what new comedy is. And that's what I have time for today. Thank you.